Well, hello, I am Matt Williamson, and we are going to talk Steeler O versus Texan D. I expect Steelers to have some success in this game, but we're going to nerd out with the stats. Got lots of them, and I think they paint a very vivid picture. So, Steelers offense is averaging they're averaging 4.8 yards per play. Texans defense is allowing 5.6 yards per play. Only the Broncos, Chargers, and Bears are worse than Houston's defense. Yards per play is huge to me. Total nerd move here, but we're going to talk about all the different personnel groupings the Steelers are in. 72% of the time they're in 11. Remember, 11 means one back, one tight end. 12, they're in 23%. 13, which would be what? One back, three tight ends, 3.4%, and 0-2 personnel. You might not have heard this one yet. That's 0 backs, 2 tight ends, 1.1%. That's only been 2 plays. So really, 72.5%, they're in 11, 23%, they're in 12. I'd like to see a little more diversification there. Now, Houston's defense has faced 11 on 63%. They've faced 12 on 20%. They've seen 20 on 7.7%, 21 on 5.7, and 13 on 2.1. They've also seen 22 personnel, 2 backs, 2 tight ends, 2 snaps. I know that's a lot to digest. But the Texans have only used their dime package with 6 defensive backs on the field under 1% of their snaps. It's like 1 snap or 2 snaps. That's not what the Steelers do, talking about personnel groupings, but with Stingley out, what if you went 4 wide? It'd be easier with Deontay, of course, and try to force them into their dime. I don't see that happening. It's not what the Steelers do. It's not what Canada does, but they hate dime. Why not try to get them in dime, especially when their best corner is missing? So George Pickens has put up 75-plus receiving yards in the past 2 games. Deontay hasn't been there. That is his best 2-game stretch of his young career. He's accounted for 33% and 23% of the targets with Deontay Johnson out of the lineup, and his target share has increased each week. Pickens was on the field for 100% of the Steelers' pass plays in Week 3. That's not the norm, by the way, folks. Pickens' 16 yards per reception average is 3rd best since entering the league, only behind Jalen Waddle and A.J. Brown. With Johnson out of the lineup over the past 2 weeks, Calvin Austin has run a route on 88% of Pittsburgh's dropbacks compared to 68% for Allen Robinson. Austin's 23% targets per route run was the highest of his career. Austin has been targeted 10 times, but only has 3 receptions over the past 2 games. So I think it's very clear that when the Steelers are right, or even with Johnson out, Austin has to be ahead of Robinson in the pecking order. He just has to be. I mean, the way they move is night and day. So I would hope, and this indicates that the Steelers agree with me, that you feature the more explosive younger player. I mean, to me, that's the move. I don't even think it's close, to be very honest with you. Pat Freiermuth has yet to top 4 targets in any game this year after averaging 6.1 targets per game last season. However, the Texans have allowed an 85% catch rate, 30th, and an 8.1 yards per target, 26th, to opposing tight ends. It's time to get Muth even more involved. I mean, I wrote this article last week. You guys saw it, a lot of good responses. That's what I was saying, and they did against the Raiders. It's time to even take it up another notch. Kenny Pickett's 2.7 seconds average time to throw is the 9th highest in the NFL. However, Houston's opponents are getting the ball out of their hands on average of 2.3 seconds. Only the Vikings defense is facing a shorter time to throw. So teams are, boom, get it out. That's how they're attacking Houston. And I'd like to see the Steelers do a lot of that too. Only 3 defenses are allowing a higher completion rate than Houston. However, only 5 defenses allow fewer yards per reception. Well, that goes back to average time to throw. Ball's coming out quick. You're completing a lot of them, but not for a ton of yards. So quick rhythm passing is how everyone is attacking this team. And they play a lot of zone. The Texans defense didn't have a sack last week. On 40 Trevor Lawrence dropbacks. They have just 4 sacks all year, and no one on Houston's defense has more than 1. Only the Bears, Giants, and Falcons have fewer sacks than Houston. Najee Harris has a gain of 10 or more yards on 4 of his 38 scrimmage plays this year. That's 10.5%, which is well above his career average. However, on runs of 15 yards or more, which is what a lot of people call explosive runs, Harris has an explosive run rate of 11.4%, which is best in the league. Best in the league. Who would have thought that? Last year, Harris had an explosive run rate of 2.6%, as opposed to 11.4 this year. This season, Harris has 79 of his rushing yards from explosive runs in 2022. Again, 79 yards already on these type of runs. Last year, he got 135 yards all year on explosive runs. So I think he's playing a lot better than people think, by the way. Despite playing his lowest percentage of snaps, just 50%, Harris got his most touches, 19, of the season last week. Jaylen Warren's 32% target share per route run is the highest among all NFL running backs that have played 50 or more snaps. No one else is over 30%. Warren's snap share has climbed each week. This isn't an indictment on Warren. It's a small one on Matt Canada. But his target share for route run, as I just said, is the highest among NFL running backs. Kind of tells the world that when he runs routes, he's getting the ball, but it's only 32%. I mean, so it's not like, oh, Warren's out here running around, he's getting the ball, key on him. You know, maybe a little, you know what I mean? But, you know, it's just one of these strong tendencies. All right, I'll be back here in a minute with some more stuff similar along these lines. You guys always seem to enjoy these. Always get good feedback. So good stuff. Be back in a moment. Houston has allowed 7 rushing touchdowns. That's tied with Denver for most in the league. But 31% of Pittsburgh's rushing attempts have failed to gain yardage. That's the highest percentage in the NFL. 2 different things, but too many. 31% of the Steelers' rushing attempts have failed to gain yardage. Houston's defense limited Jacksonville to just 5 for 13 on third downs. The Jaguars also were unsuccessful on their lone 4th down try. Jags were pretty broken in that game, to be honest with you. And the Texans also didn't give up a play of more than 28 yards against Jacksonville. The Jets are the only offense that has been worse than Pittsburgh's at converting a series of downs into a new series of downs. What are you talking about, Williamson? No, what I mean is you get the ball, 1st and 10. Either on 1st down, 2nd down, 3rd down, you get a new series of downs, or you turn it over. People just start tracking this year from what I've seen. So again, the Jets are the only offense that's been worse than Pittsburgh's at converting a series of downs into a new series of downs. The Steelers have only accomplished this at a 56% rate. League average is 70% rate. However, the Texans' defense ranks 22nd in this metric, and last week, Pittsburgh converted a series of downs into a new series on 62% of their drives. Playing those first 2 defenses doesn't help. The Steelers only have 3 red zone drives this season, lowest in the NFL. They have also just produced 41 first downs, 2nd worst. Over the course of 3 games, you've only made 41 first downs. It's really bad. Only the Colts and Chiefs are scoring fewer points than Pittsburgh in the 4th quarter of games this year. The Steelers' offense in the second half of games is producing just 6.7 points. Only the Raiders and Cardinals are worse. Houston's defense is giving up the most points in the league, though, in the 3rd quarter of games, but they're the 5th best in the 4th quarter of points allowed. I hesitated to put this in there, but I thought that was kind of strong. All the second half stuff for both these teams when the Steelers have the ball. I only hesitated because we got 3 samples of third quarters, 3 samples of fourth quarters. You know what I mean? Like, it's something, you know, are you making adjustments through the game, or you're wearing out as a defense, or did the clock at the end of the third quarter, the whistle blows and you're on the 1 yard line and then it counts for a fourth quarter touchdown. You know what I mean? Like, there's some weird stuff that could happen too. But the Steelers only have 2 first quarter first downs, lowest in the league. That's horrendous. All right, last thing I got here is some snap count stuff to kind of get you a little bit familiar with sort of a no-name Houston defense. So last week, they basically play a 4-3. So their defensive ends, Will Anderson, who you know, I'm sure, he was a 3rd pick in the draft, blocked the kick last week, promising prospect. Will Anderson, Jonathan Greenard, Dylan Horton, and Jerry Hughes. They all played between 41 and 60% of Houston's defensive snaps. Similarly, the defensive tackles, Sheldon Rankins, Malik Collins, Khalil Davis, you might remember him, former Steeler, and Kurt Hinish, they all played between 49% and 53% of that snaps in that game. So what's that tell us? They have 40 ends, 40 tackles that are all basically playing half the game. They're just, besides Anderson and kind of Rankins, they're all just a bunch of okay dudes. They're kind of Jags, placeholders, okay, you know, some of them wouldn't make the Steeler roster possibly, but they're keeping them fresh. They're just bringing in waves of defensive linemen throughout the course of the game. At linebacker, Henry Choto, T-O-T-O-O, I always kill his name. He played 95% of the Texans snaps, but he's the only one in the front 7 that played more than 63% of their snaps against Jacksonville. So he's their every down linebacker. He's a rookie, and that's kind of what this team's doing, is looking for building block players. For the season, though, Houston doesn't have a front 7 defender that has been on the field more than Toto, but he's only logged 137 of a possible 194 snaps. So his role's growing, but it wasn't like he's been the guy, every down linebacker from day one. And then of all the defensive linemen, Greenard and Anderson, they're their best 2 defensive ends. They lead all the defensive linemen with 133 of a possible 194 snaps apiece. So I hope that gives you a pretty good understanding of the opponent, strengths and weaknesses. I think it's an interesting matchup, but we will be back tomorrow, take on the other side of the ball and predictions.